And then he says something, and then the guide turns to me. He says, at night, you can see them white shapes as they come down the mountain.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Monsters Lounge. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Tressa. Hey everybody, it's an old switcheroo tonight. Dave's doing a Tuesday and we're doing tonight, so enjoy us.
It's Monday?
No, it's fine. Keep going.
Okay, all right. I got a little confused there. You just told me to show up, and so it did.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. All right. We have a really good show. As opposed to every other week when I tell you we have a bad show.
You gotta stop doing that. It's weird.
I know. I'd like to tell people that ahead of time. So like if it's really good, then I'm like, man, boy, did we pull it off.
Knocked it out of the park. No one was expecting that.
No one at all.
Nope.
Mm-mm. So around Chicago, and actually around the town that I live in, there are quite a few ghost tours going on. And tonight, we are going to go on one right now. Now, we're going to talk to somebody who puts them all together, organizes them, does them, knows a ridiculous amount of things. We're going to talk to Mike Huberty tonight. Yes, that's what you say.
Was
yes.
I supposed to bring him on, or
no?
You have more to say?
I have more to say. I just hoped you were going to agree with me on that.
I was trying to mute my mic because your dang bird clock was going off. Go ahead.
More about that later. All right. So Mike Huberty was always interested in ghost stories, UFO sightings, and other weird tales. In 2010, he founded a tourism company called Madison Ghost Walks, dedicated to preserving the Wisconsin capital city's history and folklore, as well as showing people a great time around the city. Madison Ghost Walks has now expanded to American Ghost Walks, preserving and boosting haunted history across the country in places like Minneapolis, Chicago, Los Angeles, coastal Maine. That's got to have some great stories. Puerto Rico, Hawaii, New Orleans, and more. American Ghost Walks is now in over 25 cities nationwide and has even been featured on Shark Tank. And not the Asylum movie Shark Tank, the actual show Shark Tank.
That's okay too, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. He's also a songwriter, playing bass and singing in weird Wisconsin rock bands, Sunspot, which has performed thousands of shows over the past 2 decades and opened up for artists as diverse as Flaming Lips to KC and the Sunshine Band.
Love it.
More excited about the last one, but please help me welcome Mike.
Yay!
Hello.
How are you?
Good. You know, I wish I was in the Asylum Shark Tank. I think we would have done better.
Oh, man.
Than we did.
all would.
It's such a good movie. I just saw that. You know what movie I watched last night that was phenomenal? That's Asylum. Sharknado, The Heart of Sharkness.
Which one is that?
Oh, it is a mockumentary, or whatever, fake documentary about the making of the first version of Sharknado. I highly recommend. That's
well, as a Tara Reid super fan myself.
Come on.
I understand.
She gets some chainsaw hand. Are you kidding me? Of course.
No, she's amazing. She's amazing. I've been jealous of Carson Daly for decades.
That's fair. Haven't we all been, though?
Yeah.
Various reasons.
Various
reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mike.
Yes.
I want to hear about ghost stories. So I was perusing through your website and looking at all the different places that you do ghost tours in, and it's ridiculous. You have a huge list of places that you go. Is there a favorite that you have?
Oh, I mean, it's like picking a favorite of your children if your children were serial killers.
Wait, do parents not do that?
Well, I mean,
like
mine
what
certainly did. And that was my sister, who actually, she founded Milwaukee's first ghost tour in 2008.
Oh, I can see why
So,
she's the favorite.
yeah, so
Yeah.
she beat me to the punch. So she obviously was mom and dad's favorite. And so that's why at Christmas, she gets all the presents and I got the coal. But
Oh.
no, I shouldn't say, but no, Allison and I work together now. American Ghost Walks, we kind of joined forces. And so she started she was working as a teacher in Milwaukee. And during the summers was like, hey, that's a good way to, we both were always into ghost stories, always into haunted places. We grew up watching, That's Incredible. I'm going to date myself, but,
Heck yeah.
my old girlfriend, Kathy Lee Crosby, John Davidson, and then obviously Hall of Famer Fran Tarkenton. No,
course.
but and even though he was a Minnesota Viking, and I find it distasteful to say his name, I did enjoy watching That's Incredible, because they would have things like the haunted Toys R Us in California. They would have werewolves in England. They kind of took this stuff seriously way before paranormal reality TV. And so it was always exciting when there was something on, they had some kind of true paranormal story. We'd watch that and we were really into it. My mom, our mother was a contest trivia, like a radio contest superhero, as in she would win. We had a calendar based on, like, because you had a 30-day eligibility after you won something, and then she had a calendar of which radio stations then she'd be eligible to
Oh my
go
God.
to.
I
That's
love it so
amazing.
much.
Me too.
And so we lived, so living in Milwaukee, we could get WGN, the Chicago radio stations, and the Chicago radio stations had better prizes.
All right.
I love Milwaukee, obviously, a lot. It is a home of a lot of great men, but the
Tell me about it.
right, that's what the ladies tell me. But we'd listen, and then WGN would often have this guy named Richard Crowe, who was like Chicago's ghost hunter. And Richard Crowe would come on Halloween, and he would tell, great stories that, Resurrection Mary, and the stories of the Lincoln train, just different parts of Chicago. And we were just fascinated to hear these true ghost stories on the radio. And Mom would let us stay up late to listen to them. And so Richard Crowe basically invented kind of haunted history tourism as we know it. Okay. So his Resurrection Mary tour in Chicago was basically the first kind of haunted history tour that we kind of are used to now, that people go on, that I, use to pay the bills or whatever. And it was just something we were always into. And so my sister started this Milwaukee tour. She started over the summer, and she was teaching the rest of the time. And I was playing with my band one summer, and we were out playing, and then we had a tour, and we finished the tour, and I came home, and I was like, I have no way to make any money now. Like, what am I going to do? And, I'm a musician, so I have no skills. And so then I was like, okay, so what are we going to do next? And my sister's like, you should start a ghost tour in Madison. And I'm like, and it was August, and I'm like, yeah, September and October, I could get going. And so then the first thing I did was I went down to the Capitol Square. So Madison is for you non-geography fans out there, and it's okay if you're not. And it's okay if you don't know anything about Wisconsin. I don't blame you.
Wisconsin is lovely, everybody.
No, it is very lovely.
I love Wisconsin. I really do. It's
and Madison is gorgeous. That town square area is so nice.
Yeah, the Capitol. It's a great place to be trapped in. But I went down to the Capitol Square, and then I just started walking around bars and restaurants and nightclubs, and I started asking people, "Is it haunted?" And the first place I went was a place in Madison called the Great Dane.
That just sounds haunted.
The Great Night. Right. Well, Scooby-Doo, obviously.
Obviously.
Hello. No, I should have said, anyway, never mind. You know
Oh, you blew it.
Yeah, right. You got the joke. You laughed inside. That's what counts. So I went down to the Great Dane. And I order a beer, and because that's the best way to start an investigation.
Yes.
And
Clearly.
I just say to the waitress, like, "Hey, I know this is going to sound weird," and that's how I start most of my conversations.
Me too.
That's
Yeah,
how
I'm like,
Tessa
this
starts
is-
most of her dates.
Right.
Yes.
I know this is going to
And
sound weird, and I said,
doctor's
"But
visits.
is this place right, doctors? But is this place haunted?" And she looks at me, maybe half a second of hesitation, and then says, "Well, I've seen at least 2 ghosts, but you should talk to the manager because I think the manager thinks there's 4."
Oh my God.
And I'm like, "Bingo."
Sold.
So then we just start talking. I start collecting her stories. I get the history of the Great Dane, find out that it's built in 1850 as the Fess Hotel, known as the Hotel for the Common Man. Right? Even the kind of marketing BS they had in 1850. But,
Yeah.
but they had a place for like that, like a little stable where you could bring in your horse and things like that before they had like the terrible parking that they have now. And, parking was better in 1850, which, but the beer's good.
That's what I keep saying. Everybody just needs to ride horses again.
Yeah.
Better parking.
Yeah, well, let's come to Madison Square, ride horses, see how well you do. But anyway, so started getting into the history, start looking at this place, find out it was a hotel for 140 years. It was offices at some point. You start going into the history of the building, finding out that when they first started converting the hotel rooms to offices, they started getting phone calls from rooms that no longer had the phones in them.
Oh.
And they hear people just like talking where you can't really understand what the words are, and kind of like when you're going through withdrawals, kind of talking when they don't understand what the words are, and then they'd hear breathing and things like that on the other end. And so they started getting phone calls from these rooms that no longer existed, and people started having the feeling of being watched. Certain doors just wouldn't lock when you locked them, and they'd open on their own. They had a room called the spooky room that nobody liked going to.
I have one of those. It's for something else, though.
So you start collecting all this information about it because this is, 1850. Wisconsin became the state in 1848. 1850, they're working on building the Capitol right in that Capitol Square, which is a block away from the Great Dane. Great Dane's on King Street in Madison, which is the entertainment, it's still an entertainment district, still has theaters and, all this stuff. But back then it was bars and, it was Madison's red light district. So that's where, people would come in, the guys finish working on the Capitol and they want to go have a drink and a good time. They went down to this area 170 some years ago. And so you start learning about that. You're like, oh yeah, red light district. Where'd that come from? And you're like, first of all, you learn that the term red light district first appears in the Milwaukee Sentinel in like 1874. So then you're like, hell yeah, girls were right when they said guys from Milwaukee are the best. And
I don't think that makes them the best, but keep going.
Yeah, right. Well, fair.
But
But but then like, oh, there's these different, like, where did the term even come from? Like, why is it red light? Is it from the Police song? No. It's from the idea that when the places were open, they would switch they'd have the white light up there, and then guys coming in when they were they were open for business, they turned the red light on, they'd switch it. So it was like an occupied thing in an airplane bathroom.
Oh, so it's just like a bathroom. The whole red light district was just a bathroom. That is so nice to know, and glad we uncovered that.
But in 1850, it probably was kind of like a bathroom.
Yeah, let's just breeze over that.
But that kind of thing. So you go in there and you're like, okay, so this is where you're starting to, one little story starts uncovering another and until you have like a whole narrative about a place and a whole narrative about that street, then becomes the narrative about what was happening in Wisconsin at the time, what was interesting as the territory was changing into a state, and how how did that affect the history of where we're walking around, and what were the beliefs of the people? What were they scared of? What was the history at the time that contributed to the ghost stories of it? And then so the ghost stories connect to the history, and that just makes for a much more interesting lesson than the usual civics tour you might get if you're just walking through the state capitol.
It's nice to have some incentive to learn, and I feel like getting a little spooky stuff on the side, always fun.
Yeah.
It's the spoonful of poison helps. I don't know would be the way to put it, but that helps the history.
Sprinkling of evil,
Right. The spoonful of evil helps the history go down.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And so, it kind of just started developing from there. So it's like, okay, now we have this first location in Madison that I go to. Great. Now, what else do I got? So I go to the library, start going through books. One of my friends was a local club owner, right around the block from the Great Dane. And I come in there one night and I'm talking to him, and it's like an off night, so he's just working the door. And I order a drink or whatever. You have to order a drink at the beginning to show people you're serious.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But also not to look like you're not contributing.
Right.
So you just come in. If you come in, you're not like a cop interrogating them. You're just a regular that's interested in learning some stories.
Hey. We're just hanging out. We're just buds. It's fine. What's going on?
Yeah. And so hey man, does this place got any ghosts? What? Yeah, like ghosts. What? Yeah, I'm working on his haunted history tour, and I want to see if this place is haunted. And then he's just like, "But yeah, man." And then immediately goes in to start talking about when they were setting. And this is 2 years after they had moved into the place. He starts telling me about when they're down there and they're painting out the dressing rooms and things like that. People were having weird experiences. Hair was being pulled. Stuff was getting knocked over. They were hearing things when there was nobody else, when they were in the middle of the night working on stuff and there was nobody else in the building. He told me a story himself about falling asleep at his desk in his office. The door's closed and he hears people outside, and it's after bar time. So he fell asleep, and he's like, oh, I bet it's the staff, and they're wondering, hey, can we leave now? Is everything okay? And, he hears this whispering. Do you think he can hear us? Do you think he can hear us? And he's like, oh, and he opens the door, says, hey, it's no problem. There's nobody there.
Ugh.
Sees that. I was like, huh. Closes the door, and the voices start again.
I love it.
And he's like, well, that's the last time I spent the night. So things like that, you start collecting, and you're like, okay, well
I'm sorry, what was the venue before he started converting it to his club?
Well, it was another nightclub before then, and it was a nightclub for a while. But I mean, a couple decades before that, it was a funeral home.
Oh,
hey, so you've had plenty of bodies pass through there, and in the place next door, the realty, it was split up into two different offices. The place next door was a realtor, and then he had the bar, and then the realtor had a nice, like, kind of picture window. I don't know if I'm saying picture, but it's like a big window, and that's where the parlor was, where they put the bodies, and people would all come in to pay their respects, like right there. And so you had an innumerable amount of murders. I'm sorry, not murders, deaths. That happened.
Wait a minute.
I was thinking something else, because that also led to, there's a place upstairs from that venue that's been a long-standing
murder factory.
No, not necessarily a murder factory.
Okay,
sorry. A different kind of factory, but it's going back to where it was. We talked about the red light district.
Oh,
so this is a massage parlor that's been around still around. It's been around for 50 years. And in the early 80s, one of Madison's most famous, like, true crime, there was a girl that worked there, a college student. She was from Chicago. She went to school in Madison. Very intelligent. A couple of the people that used to visit her at the massage parlor ended up dead.
Oh.
And so She eventually went on trial, didn't admit a thing, never got into it. A true crime author wrote a book about it called The Winter of Frozen Dreams. And they made a movie about it called The Winter of Frozen Dreams, starring the American Beauty herself, Thora Birch, as the character. And so, I mean, I read it just because I wanted. It's fun to see true crime in all the places and they talk about places that you're like, hey, and so just in that block, you've got the Great Dane and the ghosts there, and then moving on, you have the nightclub with the scary basement and the crazy stories. You've got the funeral parlor, so the history of that, and then you've got a true crime thing upstairs. And it just a little walking around, you find these interesting things that other people aren't going to be like, see up there? Yeah, somebody's happy ending ended bad. You're not going to get that on the usual tour, and you're not going to really. It's true. And our tours, we try to make them not too prurient, not too graphic. Don't like wallow in this is fun to talk about in a show and stuff like that. But for normal consumption, we don't try to dwell on the super
the very very dark things.
The dark stuff, and also the things that are exploitative. It's always going to have a shade of exploitation because people die. We're talking about criminals. We're talking about gangsters. We're talking about murderers. So there's always going to be a little bit of that. But there's always the line of delving too much into it, where now we're wallowing in people's misery.
Right.
That is not no.
Right, but also you can't avoid the elephant in the room, and you can't. You're not making this. It's not a Disney thing.
Right.
So
ghosts are made in a specific way, and sometimes it's not so innocent.
Right.
On occasion.
So that's we always try to have that balance of okay, well, here's some of the wild stuff that happened here, and then you gauge the crowd and you try to tell them a compelling story while also honoring the fact that sometimes the people were innocent and terrible, and you try to get that. And sometimes the people were kind of terrible, and so but you still respect the fact that humans are humans and have lives and souls and all that kind of business. And if the souls are still hanging around, and I'm not saying I know anything about souls hanging around or ghosts or what they are, or that's sure. That's above my pay grade. But I certainly, we try to treat everything with some kind of respect.
Just appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, even when you talk about Milwaukee. And in Milwaukee, there's gangster stories, there's tragedy stories. Chicago, obviously, too, is a ton of gangsters. Al Capone's been to every bar. According to the bar lore, Al Capone's been to every bar in Wisconsin. And you're like, how did he have time to run a criminal enterprise if he was spending every weekend?
Priorities.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, he must have had a great, consigliere. But with my mafia terms, I'm not sure about the actual hierarchy of the outfit or whatever they were called in the 1920s in Chicago. But he must have had a great second in command, because he was always in Wisconsin. Because everybody's like, yeah, Al Capone hung out here,
which is weird because he was always everywhere in Illinois too.
That's true.
Yeah.
Maybe he's omnipresent.
Doppelgangers?
Yeah.
I feel like doppelgangers.
I feel like he had clones, and that was the way he kept himself safe. He's like, obviously, I'm going to set out some fake Al Capones to draw away the cops and Bugsy Malone, or whatever my enemies are.
Clearly.
That's logical.
I think we'll get more into
Bugs
doppelgangers
Moran. Sorry,
in
did I say
just
Bugsy
1
Malone?
second.
Different guy.
Yeah, well.
Different guy.
Yeah, we'll get back to doppelgangers in a second. And I want to hear more about the rest of the country and ghosts in a minute.
Those of you naysayers, I want you to know how much I appreciate how many of you grabbed a hold of my small package after last week's show. It is out and available. You can get both of my books, The Other Side, A Guide to the Paranormal and Ghost Hunting, and my brand new book, Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness. Both books are out. One, of course, kind of a how-to ghost hunt book, and the other story book of strange supernatural occurrences all around the world. You can get your hand on my small package by just ordering it right off of my website. You can go right to paranormal60.com, scroll down on the front page there, or go to the shop and scroll down and you'll see our book bundle. And I was so humbled by the fact of how many men put their hands on my small package at the end of last week's show and bought it. It was great. It made me feel loved and wanted. I'm not going to lie.
All right.
Okay. Well, I guess my worries about appropriateness then are out the window.
Why?
Yeah.
You know, I was going to say,
Okay.
Dave's a tall guy. I'm surprised.
Yeah. Well, listen, that
He's got the
confusion and
2 bucks.
surprise
I mean-
aside. So I get the being around the Midwest and finding stories there. How do you end up with stories from places like Puerto Rico and Hawaii?
Well, with Puerto Rico, this is kind of a funny story, but it's probably like describing to somebody a dream. Like when you tell somebody a dream, like, "Oh, that's fascinating." You're like, "No, it's not."
No, no, it's not.
But
It's okay. I can pretend to look very fascinated.
well,
Look,
that's
see?
what you're going to have to do with this story. So, we go back. Let's go back in time. My wife and I used to really love going to, or we still love it, but we would go to Puerto Rico regularly for vacations. And then Hurricane Maria happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had contacted some friends down there. And we're just like, hey, it looks like, things are going terrible. Is there anything we can do? And they're just like, yeah, you can come down and drink beer. Come down, like spend money, tourist money. The best thing you do is come visit and, contribute to the economy. And I'm like, oh, that's not that hard. But it was funny. We were having a conversation at, we were having like lunch that day. We have a conversation about that. And I said, I got these, and I just started ghost tours outside of Madison. I hadn't joined forces with my sister in Milwaukee yet, but we lived in Minneapolis for a couple of years. So I started a tour in Minneapolis, and I just started one in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which is a vacation town between Milwaukee and Chicago. And so I was just figuring out how to run things in different areas. And I was like, it'll be cool because they don't have one in Puerto Rico. It'd be awesome to have one in the old Spanish district called Old San Juan in Puerto Rico. And my wife's like, yeah, it'd be fun. And then we kind of just go on with our lunch. Don't even think about it. So we used to listen to Coast to Coast AM a lot. When
Amen.
We were,
Mm-hmm.
and then but at that point we hadn't for several years. And as we get into bed that night, she's like, I'm having trouble going to sleep. Can you put Coast to Coast on maybe? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I put it on, and the whole episode's about Puerto Rico. And I'm like, oh.
No such thing as a coincidence.
Well, there's your sign.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, all right. So I guess I better get to work. So then, a couple months later, once we got past the scene in, the Halloween season in the Midwest, and I was like, okay, let's start to look. And then I went down there. I don't speak Spanish, but we used to play in Austin regularly in Texas. And so I've got a bunch of buddies that do. So I grabbed one of my friends that is a duo not a Duolingo master. He's native to both English and Spanish. Right. Bilingual. I'm saying Duolingo.
There you go.
Duolingo. He's
There we
really
go.
practiced. He does his Duolingo every night. And so I thought, let's take this guy to Puerto Rico. No, he just can flawlessly translate. And he can flawlessly translate after like 10 beers. So I knew this was going to be,
That's impressive.
that we could go from place to place and talk to people and start collecting stories. And so that's what we did. We went down, started collecting stories. And then you get that, of course, you get that weird look like, what do you care about ghost stories for? It's like, I'd like to start a business down here doing ghost stories. And everybody's looking at you like, you're an idiot. I'm like, okay, but tell me your story. And then most people would. At one of the hotels called the El Convento, which is a former convent. Who'd have guessed the El Convento is a former convent? But see, maybe I do speak Spanish.
Well, me
There
as
you
a
go.
Duolingo master knew that, but it's okay.
Exactly. Obviously, you've been working the app. But the so we get into it, And like he takes us around. Like he shows us different art. He shows us a room. He tells us where the weird things have happened. And then we just start collecting some stories, go into the history, and then by the end of the next Halloween season, I went down and hired a couple of guides, gave them a script, and then we started going. And then now now it goes most nights of the year. And we also sell our tours through Royal Caribbean and Carnival. So it's been a real, so that was just like, hey, it was like there was nothing was going on. There was an opportunity. And we found a way to make sure that, number one, you're hiring locals, and because you have to hire tour guides that are licensed, the whole thing. So you're not just coming down and bringing in high school students working for $12 an hour. You get great people who are interested, who are excited about the topic, who also have a deep connection to the place, as well as an understanding of the history. And then you put that with the ghost stories and connect them on top. And then you got a fun 2 hours on a Tuesday night for you to do in Old San Juan.
Right. So what is your favorite story coming out of that area?
Actually, I think the most interesting story that came out of there isn't even one that's on our tour. For me, because I know the Old San Juan story so well, it's a story that happened in a different part of the island. And I'd love to bring more attention to it because it's something that I'd never heard about. So in the 1980s, like the worst mudslide disaster in American history happens in Puerto Rico. And dozens of people go missing. They get buried under the mudslide.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure I pronounce the town right, because that's always the tricky part. Mameyes, Mameyes, is a town that happens, and it's in the Miami's neighborhood of this area called Ponce, which is kind of on the Puerto Rico is about the size of Connecticut. And so if you think of San Juan, which is kind of on the northeastern side, and then Ponce is more on the south, close to almost southwestern side of the island. If you think of Connecticut like a sand, it's a kind of a flat state, like a sandwich. Mm-hmm. And so, Puerto Rico is much shaped the same way.
Right, a sandwich state.
Right.
Yeah.
I know. Maybe I'm hungry. Maybe I shouldn't have done. Maybe I should have had some before I came. But that this 1985 Puerto Rican flood, this horrible things happened. Like they even have a little museum dedicated to it, and we went there, and in the museum, they show like, well, here is what happened with the mudslide, because these houses were built like on top of, almost, because Puerto Rico's mountainous. So like it's not quite a mountain range, but there's very hilly areas, and this area is very hilly. And so people in this neighborhood, they had houses at different elevations on the hill, right? And then there's a school at the bottom of the hill. And so a couple of days before the floods, the kids in the kindergarten class, and that, like, I think maybe it was even the Head Start class, because they talk about Head Start in the museum, but it's the kids in the class, and they start drawing these pictures of like people drowning, of cemeteries, of like bodies, with crosses over the eyes and everything.
Oh my God.
And it's several kids, and they still have the pictures.
Oh my gosh.
And so the pictures are in the museum, and these kids were talking about a disaster happening. They were drawing a disaster happening, people dying, a flood and things that happened 2 days later. And half those kids disappeared.
Oh no.
No.
It's one of those stories that's just so terrifying.
Right.
Children doing something nice, like, hey, well, it's coloring time. You know, hey, let's draw something. You know, it's like my daughter draws a robot. That's wonderful. If she drew herself dying in a flood, I'd be like, no, come on, that's not going to happen. That's fantasy. It's a bad dream. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it.
Right.
But then it happens. And, you know, some of those kids didn't survive.
Oh my god.
And so we go out to the site. There is there's like a little statue, like a little memorial, but it's overgrown now. And I think you can't really get to it. It's, they haven't really taken care of it. It's one of those things like if there's not a budget for taking care of the memorial, they're not going to take care of the memorial.
Right.
So the memorial you can go to, like in the middle of the hilly area, but at the bottom you can still see the school, which now is just a concrete shell.
Yeah.
But you can see that place, and it has a heavy feeling about it.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And so, and as we were, we're driving around the place, and one of my Puerto Rican guides who's from that area took me there, and he's like, you got to hear this story. And it's an amazing story, and it's a tragedy. And, but it's also an area that a lot of people don't think about because it's not in the main kind of municipality like San Juan. And so as we're talking to some of the people, who live on the mountain, as we're driving out, we talked to this one guy, and, they're having a conversation in Spanish next to me, and he goes, hey, you want to ask him about ghosts? And I'm like, well, we're here. Like, I want to ask him about ghosts. And he's like, have you ever seen anything? And the guy just, he's like, see? And then he says something, and then the guy turns to me, he says, at night, you can see them white shapes as they come down the mountain. And he's like, they're still here.
Oh.
And I'm like, all right, dude. Like, oh man, because it's not, I mean, I'm probably, a couple years older than the kids who died in that flood, in that landslide.
Mm-hmm.
And there's obviously a ton of people there who still remember it. I mean, obviously the museum, and it was in 2021 that we went, and so most things still weren't even open in Puerto Rico. Like we had to, you had to have a test to even get off the plane,
right?
Kind of thing, and so, but it was great because the guy opened for us and let us, let me check it out, and let me ask as many questions as I wanted to, and the people there are very warm and open and wonderful, and so that to me is the most like something where dozens of Americans die.
Yeah.
To me is the kind of thing where I'd expect most of us would know more about it. And something I'm like, what do you? There was floods. I mean, in 1985. I guess I didn't watch the news all the time, but I watched enough TV that I remember natural disasters and things like that. So that was just the kind of thing where it's like you never really heard about. But then,
can I ask a question about the man who said he saw the figures coming down the mountain?
Yeah.
Was he insinuating every night he saw this?
We didn't really. I didn't get a lot of nuance because. Obviously, I didn't bring my Duolingo, or I didn't have have Google Translate with me. I didn't get good service there.
Right.
So sorry, Verizon, but the they're not one of your sponsors, right?
Yes.
Biggest one.
Okay,
one. We get mad Verizon money. I'm telling you.
You guys must have crazy data.
Seriously.
So. He was just saying, I don't know if he would have said I don't know if it was every night or just when it gets dark. He was saying you can see the white figures come down the mountain. And I didn't really press it like, dude, this happens every night, man. Because it had that, it had that
that's
feeling.
It's a community you don't want to like upset. It's still,
you're not going to walk into Auschwitz and be like, and how many people fit in this room?
Right.
It was that kind of, right. So you're just not going to, it was just that kind of, it was a heavy feeling about it where it didn't feel like, I didn't want to press it.
Yeah,
and
and
maybe,
you know,
that's my
you did
maybe
the
that's
right-
my weakness. Maybe that's the weakness.
No,
Nope.
sir.
Where a real journalist would have been like, "Hey, pal, give me the facts."
I was just
All right.
curious.
Well,
Don't make it
only if
weird.
you were a journalist in 1920.
Sure,
You know,
that's
first
true.
of all, second of all, but that's
Buster.
probably why your tours, you know, resonate with people is the humanity
true.
behind it, right?
We tried. I mean, we do. It's hard because it is easy to get into the blood and guts. And if we're talking about like horror movies or whatever, or fiction like that, to me, it's like, oh, that can be fun.
Right.
But I mean, fictional characters, I mean, all egregores aside and such, fictional characters, I don't know, they don't have feelings. They're, you know, I don't care if I hurt Chat GPT's feelings. I don't care if Claude cries.
You don't
You know?
say please and thank you. I gotta say please and thank
No,
you.
I do.
You
I do
really
that to
do. They're
Siri
doing
sometimes.
that.
That's the worst. The
See?
worst is when you tell
Same.
Siri thank you, and I'm like, you're tricking me, Tim Cook. Like that's not. I shouldn't be saying thank you to a computer.
You should say it to everybody. It doesn't
You
matter. if
really
they're real or
should.
not.
Yeah, that's all right. I run into things and say, "Excuse me, they're inanimate objects." It's fine.
All right. Well,
Your
Jenny's
table
an,
loves you
Jenny's
very
an
much.
animist, and I appreciate that.
Mhm. Just saying, you know. And I run into a lot of stuff. Anyway,
Anyway,
Moving
let's hear
along.
more about more ghost stories right after this.
Oh, hey, Tressa. Jenny? Oh, I'm just reading my book by international TV sensation, Dave Schrader. I'm reading the book, too. I don't remember the name of it or who wrote it, but yeah. There. I like your shirt. You? I got it on monstersloungepodcast.com. You've got a great shirt, too. Oh, this? That's so weird. I got it at monstersloungepodcast.com too. They have really great stuff. A full variety. I know, right? They have everything. Shirts. Tote bags. Clutches. A phone case, I think. It's the best.
fantastic commercial, fantastic products. I'm just going to plug that again.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
Mhm.
Hey,
You should.
Christina Jessup wants to know if you did any ghost hunting while you were in Austin.
Yes, we did. At the Driskill Hotel.
How'd that go?
On 6th Street in Austin. We went with there's some guys we met down there because they were also musicians, and they were in a they had
In
a TV
Austin?
in Austin. Yeah, weird, right?
Wait, what?
Yeah, no,
Crazy talk.
people play music in Austin, in Texas too. Can you believe it? How do you keep your guitars in tune with that heat?
Right?
Yeah.
And so, but they had a TV show on the Austin public television called Strange Town, where they went into different places and
Yeah,
did
I'm into the
ghost
title.
hunting. And so, we hung out with those guys in the Driscoll Hotel. We did some interviewing, and then we went around at some of the locations to see if we got any activity, and not really at the Driscoll. Even though I don't know if you guys know the band Concrete Blonde.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Concrete Blonde had some great songs. There was Joey Bay was a big one, and then Tomorrow Wendy's Going to Die. And the drummer in our band's name is Wendy, so we always tease her. Tomorrow Wendy's Going to Die.
That's
And
horrible.
right, well,
That's what you do to bandmates, Jenny.
Is that? I'm sorry, I've never been in a band.
I didn't write the
I'm
song.
starting one with my
I blame
flute.
Jeanette Napolitano from Concrete Blonde. But she did write a song called "The Ghost of a Texas Ladies Man," and so it happened. And there's a great book called "The Ghost of the Driscoll Hotel" that you guys can pick up, written by an excellent Austin ghost tour guide. And so Jeanette Napolitano is in the shower, like getting ready for a show, or I don't know, maybe she's just hanging out in Austin because it's a cool place. And it's the coolest hotel, and it's right on 6th Street Entertainment District, Party Central, right? And she gets out of the shower and notices there's somebody in the mirror looking at her.
Oh.
And immediately thinks, obviously, there's a somebody in the room freaks out and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nobody there. There's so that's the ghost of a Texas ladies man that they wrote about her own experiences in Austin. And so I might be I probably told the story a little too quick, but people don't pay me for Austin ghost stories, so I can't promise you the factual details, but I can tell you that song is based on a paranormal experience that happened to the lead singer of Concrete Blonde at the Driscoll Hotel in Austin, Texas.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
neither did I. Have
And
you
so-
ever heard of a location and wanted to go there just based on, or like wanted to start a ghost tour just based on one specific location?
Oh, that's not because one specific location was really, well, you know what? Red Wing, Minnesota.
Okay.
The St.
I know
James
nothing.
St. James Hotel in Red Wing, Minnesota, has a ton of stories there, and that can take that itself because there's enough stories there at the St. James that can take up like 20 minutes of a tour or whatever. And so as long as you can get some stuff from the rest of the area, you can kind of build something around it. But I would say Red Wing is a nice, like, on the river type town in Minnesota. It's where the Indian casino is up there. So a lot of people go up and then they go to this nice little downtown area, quaint, to hang out. Excuse me. So I would say that one, without the St. James, I wouldn't be thin, but it wouldn't be a 90-minute paranormal extravaganza that it is in Minnesota. But that's the kind of place that just has a lot of cool stories. A lot of people go there specifically for the haunting stuff.
Okay.
And so that can be built around it. There's some places that have like one really haunted spot, and then you wish you could do more around it.
Yeah.
I think like there's certain small towns in Wisconsin and everything where there's like one place that has all of the stories, and it's an old hotel, or it's a Frank Lloyd Wright building, or it's all those kind of things where you're like, hey, that's great. Now what are we going to do for an hour afterwards?
Yeah.
Is the hard part. And because when you're building a tour, especially a walking tour, you have to think, number one, are people going to come back to close to where they parked? That's number one, because you have to think about the logistics. If you drop them off a mile from where they parked, and then just be like, bye, look, welcome to downtown Los Angeles. Have
I'd
fun.
find it hilarious, but probably not good for business.
Right. So you have to kind of think, okay, we need and it can't be too much walking. Anything, a mile and a half is usually the stretch of, that's where you can get people in their 60s can still do it over a couple hours.
I like you.
Yeah.
No, not too much walking.
It can't be like a forced march.
No.
And I've been to
I'm gonna be
ones.
tired after this. Just let me keep going with my night after this.
Right. It has to, and when you do something, and if it's going to be super long, like let's say, some of our bus tours are 3 hours long, you got to think about a bathroom break. You got to think about a way to mix it up.
Snacks. I would need snacks.
Right,
3 hours.
A place
That's
for that.
a long
Oh, we can
time.
go get, hey, if you guys, here's a drink stop or things like that, so that you kind of mix it up. Because it's still an entertainment. Even though I'm like, get to the ghost stories. And when I go on this stuff, I'm like, give me the blood. It's still, your normie is going to look at this and they still want to have a good time. Their exposure to these ghost stories, like, I saw The Conjuring. It was scary. And you have to make sure it's fun for them, as well as fun for the people who have a tattoo of Zach Baggins.
All right, that's a whole separate issue.
Yeah, it seems
Yeah.
like
What
too much
is?
dedication.
Yeah. Now I want to hear more stories, and it's all about me. So,
Obviously.
what do you have a story that's like Chicago or like Chicago suburbs that is not super well known? Like, I don't, like Resurrection Mary. I think everybody knows that story.
Yeah.
Like that kind of deal. Do you have one that's a little bit more, maybe, that you find more interesting?
Well, I do think the stuff in Chicago that excites me is
All right, settle down.
Calm down.
it's hard. Is Lincoln Park, and I didn't know much about Lincoln Park because I didn't. So I've written a lot of these tours. My sister's written a lot of these tours. The drummer of my band, her husband is a tour guide and writer and stuff like that too. So we all keep it within the group pretty tight. But when it came to Chicago, I actually purchased a company that was called Chicago Hauntings from an author and historian named Ursula Bielski.
Was there a book of that same name?
There is.
Yeah.
Ursula wrote it. And
okay.
So she kind of took the mantle after Richard. So Richard Crowe, he kind of, I remember going when I talked about him as like kind of the original guy for haunted history tourism. By the time I got to the late 90s and early 2000s, he wasn't operating constantly like he was before. And so Ursula kind of took that up. And so she started running, her and her husband at the time were running tours like every night. They, bought a bus and just created it. And the pandemic kind of she got tired. And I had gone on her tours and I'd been to her Chicago Paranormal Conference. And I'm like, I loved it. And so, when she was like, hey, I'm thinking about retiring, I was like, don't let it die. We can keep it going. And so kind of Chicago Hauntings then became part of the American Ghost Walks family. So what was exciting for me to learn was that
I think I know what you're going to say, and I'm excited to hear you say it. Let's go.
So Lincoln Park, obviously nice place. It's got the zoo. It's got everything. And it also has 10,000 bodies buried underneath.
Hello.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was the city cemetery at the time. And they were already planning on expanding, and they wanted to move the bodies and bring them out. And they'd already started the process. And then 1871, the Great Chicago Fire happened. And that puts that speeds the whole process up.
It really does.
Well, it looks like the graves are gone. Yeah, but what are we going to do with all those bodies?
If I've learned anything from Poltergeist, you don't leave the bodies.
Right. Well, they just thought nobody'd know. So they let them, so the bodies are still under Lincoln Park today. So much so that people in the bathroom at the Lincoln Park Zoo talk about seeing people in old-timey clothes behind them in the mirror.
Ew.
So you think it's somebody,
That's just me. I'm taking a tour.
right, just showing up. I thought it was a cosplay.
Yeah.
No, like you're washing your hands or something.
Jenny dresses.
And then behind you, just like Jeanette Napolitano saw the Texas Ladies Man or whatever in the Driscoll Hotel, people dressed up in early 19th century clothing. Well, early mid 19th century clothing.
Thank you. If you just said early, I would have been like, nope.
No, wait.
But nothing is mid. I'm okay with
Treaty
it.
of Chicago was 1830s, buddy. So you're way off. And I know I appreciate that. We have people call us out on, when we make a mistake or whatever, people will say like, oh, I think the date's wrong on that. And then you go back and forth. We had a whole...
Do you arm wrestle? Because that would be a plus for me on a tour. If
we arm wrestled it out.
Okay, good.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
no, absolutely. These pipes.
Over the top, man. You can
Right.
beat anything.
Obviously, me and Stallone, taking on all people that doubt our historicity or
You got it.
Okay, so here's an example of that. So I was talking about Scott, the drummer band's husband, who wrote our LA tours, and he was out there for a long time, and he led a tour. And he's talking about this place called the Knickerbocker Hotel, which is right off Hollywood Boulevard. It's Hollywood Boulevard and Ivar Avenue. And we're in front of there, and this is the place where after Harry Houdini died, shout out Wisconsin. After Harry Houdini died, his wife had a seance on the roof of the Knickerbocker on every Halloween for the 10 years after he died
Oh,
to
that's
try and
rare.
communicate with him.
Yeah.
Because obviously, so Houdini was obsessed with mediums and psychics and seances because after
Yeah.
his mother died, he was just wanted to, he was trying to talk to her. And so he was trying to find a real one. And so he would bust through the fake ones just so he could find a real one to try and talk to his mom.
Yeah, he got into a whole thing with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Right. They had the bromance, a paranormal bromance where they
Yeah,
would.
opposing sides. Opposing sides.
Right. And Arthur Conan Doyle was, he was a true believer.
Yeah,
and-
it's one of my favorite stories.
Well, they even made a TV show about it too, like called Houdini and Doyle or something like that. That was,
Did they really?
yeah, it lasted about 3 episodes, about 7 or 8 years ago.
It was not fascinating for everyone.
But it's funny. We're we're outside, and we're kind of doing the Hollywood Boulevard tour for some prospective guides, and these are all people who know a bunch about the history. They're interested. They're engaged, and they have a story about, who's the sheik, good-looking Rudolph Valentino.
Oh,
Okay. And the
Okay.
story was about that Rudolph Valentino was one of the people that, he haunts all over Hollywood Boulevard. There's a whole bunch of stuff about him. But, there's a story about how, they'd see him like dancing in the ballroom at the Knickerbocker Hotel. And then, but Scott comes in and says like, well, actually the truth is this happened, he died a year before the hotel was built. And then he gets into not an argument, but a discussion with this person who thought they knew, no, I read it here on Wikipedia or whatever. And we find it. And then we find that link to the book. And it's it ends up being that, Scott was right about the thing. But the whole idea is that we're up for, if somebody's like, no, I think this, don't interrupt the tour or whatever. But if we get a fact wrong or something that we didn't check, I'm like, let's take a look at it,
Absolutely.
because it pulls you out. Like when I'm telling people about how to present a story, when you say something like October 15th, 1856, it was a Tuesday night when the storm clouds brewed over downtown.
Excuse me, that was actually a Thursday. I think you've got your facts wrong.
Right.
air horn, arm wrestling right now.
Here we go. Going over the top. But the thing is that, presenting those facts right away is a great way to start. You hit them with facts. Oh shit, hits crazy time. Right? Because it's like, and then all of a sudden the room burst open and a translucent figure appeared and patted everybody on the head. And so when you tell a story that has a bunch of facts in the beginning and you're setting up the veracity of it, here's the event. Let's describe all these facts about the event. And then we bring in, well, here's the thing that happened that was nuts. It's so much easier to make the nuts part feel real when you've established the rest of it before going into it. So that's, we're always like, that's about, if somebody, thinks they know better or whatever, then I want to know better too.
Absolutely, yes.
So
Give me all the facts.
Right. So and obviously we're dealing with things that, I remember I took a ghost tour once in the Wisconsin Dells. The Wisconsin Dells is kind of a tourist trap.
Fantastic and beautiful.
we've
and the
all-
best
we've
place
all
on
been
earth.
there.
Right. I love the,
Yeah,
I love the
we've all been
Dells. And it's the water park capital of the world, everybody. But there was like a bus tour, the Wisconsin Dells, a haunted tour. And there's this woman one time, and we're taking the tour, and this tour is not one of mine. We did have a tour in the Wisconsin Dells for a while, but this wasn't ours. And I'm taking it, having fun. And this woman talks about these knocks and cabinets opening in her house and these different things happening in her house. And the guide goes, "That poltergeist, that's a demon. You've got a demon in your house." And he says that to this woman.
Here.
And I was like,
God.
hey,
What are you doing?
hey, asshole, quiet down. Like, you can't just say somebody's got a demon in their house. Like, what are you doing? Like, first of all, I'm like, you're not getting a tip.
No.
No.
Second of all, that is not, even if you were saying the traditional story of a poltergeist or something, that has nothing to do with demonic stuff. You're,
No.
you have a demon in your house, ma'am. Like, I wanted to punch.
Sir. Yes, you should
Oh
have.
my-
Right.
Yeah.
And like, so I said to the lady, like, hey, don't listen to that guy. Like, it sounds like it might have something weird. And if you want something to investigate it, here's my card. But, also don't let them freak you out. There's no demon in your house.
Thank you.
And that's right. And so that's why I think it's so important to be, be accurate and be sympathetic and, compassionate with this kind of stuff. Because of course, when you're a ghost tour guide and doing this, you're going to get people's personal experiences.
Obviously, yes.
And that's going to be, and then they're going to show you a picture of an orb, and this is my grandma, the orb. And and that comes with the territory, right? It's like some people are famous and they get asked for autographs. You're not famous and you get shown pictures of orbs.
Sure.
But that person wants to connect, and you have a chance to connect with them on a level deeper than, it's really cold outside, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
right.
you have that opportunity, and you get that opportunity multiple times every week. And it's a great thing. So, and if we can show people cities, new light. I think about Madison. I came here for college and I love it, and so I never left. Besides that, we went to Minneapolis and for a while, and then I went to La Crosse for a job. But otherwise, I always came back here, right? And I enjoyed it, but I never really appreciated it until I had to walk around the Capitol Square, staring at the Capitol, going into all the old buildings, learning the history of the building, and appreciating it for its gestalt, or appreciating it for all of it, for the history, for the excitement of it, for the paranormal stories of the place, for the people working there, for every little bit about it. And so I realized I changed the way I felt about this place. I mean, obviously, learning my sister's ghost stories about Milwaukee changed how I felt about that place. Because growing up, you're like, dude, Milwaukee, like Chicago's the cool neighbor. Everything you see on TV is New York and LA. Well, Brewers lost the World Series. Sucks. And then you learn the history about the place and the people that lived there and everything. And then all of a sudden you're like, man, no, this place is awesome. Mm-hmm. And there's a way to find that awesome feeling about almost all the towns in the United States. And so if we can help people do that,
go get a beer,
as well as learning ghost stories, I don't know, then there's a lot worse ways to earn a buck.
Yes.
I love that so much. That is so beautiful. And what an amazing conclusion to the show.
Yeah. Mike, give us all the information to where everyone can find these tours.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You have a ton of them.
You can, so we do tours in Wisconsin, Chicagoland, even Aurora, y'all. Wisconsin, the Twin Cities area and surrounding, Los Angeles, the Big Island of Hawaii, New Orleans, San Juan and Puerto Rico, coastal Maine. So we have 5 cities in Maine, from Portland, Bar Harbor, Booth Bay Harbor, Kennebunkport, Camden, and a little fun town called Wiscasset, and more to come in 2025. Some new locations and fun places. So we're in like 8 different spots. You can find us now, and it's all at AmericanGhostWalks.com, where you can find, we got hundreds of articles, some written by the great Ursula Bielski, some written by Scott Marcus, talking about, some written by Sister Allison Jornlin, some written by myself. And it's a fun place to go around, poke around, find some ghost stories, and then come visit us when you're in any of our towns. And we'd love to hang out.
What's the website?
AmericanGhostWalks.com.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, it was such a pleasure to have you. What a
Yes.
bunch of fun stories you had for us. You'll
Seriously.
have to come back and tell us more.
Sounds
Absolutely.
good. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, and thanks for inviting me.
That was
Thank
see
you for doing
Thank
it,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Everybody else, go to our socials and stuff. Jenny, you have something to add?
Facebook, Instagram, the webpage, whatever. Webpage, website, whatever.
Podcast.com. Same thing. Same thing, Laura.
Deal. Mike, stick around for a sec, and everybody else, thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Bye.